Hello, and welcome to another episode of TNT, the Teaching Tips podcast from the Teaching Innovations Office of the University Teaching and Learning Commons. I'm your host, Ben Peterson, the Teaching Tips guy, and today we have the final episode of this semester where we focus on the question of accessibility and universal design for learning with Bruce Pomeroy, who is the director of the Office of Accessibility Resources and Services. In my conversation with Bruce, we talk both about some of the great services that ORS can provide for faculty here at UNCG, while also talking about the principles that are at the heart of universal design. So if you're thinking about course redesign here over the upcoming summer sessions, then this could be a really helpful podcast episode for thinking in advance about the questions of universal design and accessibility that arise when thinking about course design. The releases of this episode also coincides with the release of the new accessibility website here at UNCG, accessibility.uncg.edu. So if you have questions, also make sure to check out the information on that site. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening all year to the Teaching Tips podcast, and we look forward to bringing you more soon. So I'm joined today by Bruce Pomeroy, Director of the Office of Accessibility Resources and Services here at UNCG. Thanks for joining me today, Bruce.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So today's topic is universal design. Could you tell us a little bit about what universal design is and why it's an important thing for faculty to be thinking about?
Well, certainly. And let me start by saying, let me give a shout out to my new home state of North Carolina, because universal design and the concept of it actually originated here in the state of North Carolina. A lot of credit is given to the folks up at NC State on helping develop this as an approach. And what universal design means in its purest sense is that when you are designing something, when you are planning something, whether it be physical, programmatic, whatever resource you're trying to develop, you make sure in your planning that it can benefit the most possible number in the most effective way. It's a great concept. Obviously, faculty should be thinking about that because of the diversity of their class and the types of students that they're going to have in their class. So being proactive and embracing the concepts of universal design, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in depth, is a great way to make sure that all students can benefit from the educational experience they're having here at a university like UNC Greensboro.
Great. And so what are some of those foundational core principles that when we're adopting a universal design approach we should have in mind?
Well, certainly. And all of these, by the way, are also on the ORS website. So please don't feel like you have to write everything down while I'm talking. But there are 7 concepts or 7 principles that are subscribed to when you talk about universal design. And it is equitable use, flexibility in use, try to make it simple and intuitive, perceptual information should be easily gained. There should always be a tolerance for error because everything we do is a work in progress. Low physical effort or impact is certainly a consideration. And then, of course, number 7 would be the size and space for approach and use, especially in a classroom related to some of the physical concerns or the availability for all students to participate in activities or, class things that are going on. Universal design complements many of the other disability laws that we adhere to as a university, like the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and one that's gained great prominence recently is also the Fair Housing Act related to the presence of emotional support animals on campus. I've been doing what I do for 44 years, so I'm older than dirt. I go back to a time where there wasn't a law like the ADA. And being a child of the 60s, I've always believed in equality, the civil rights movement, those types of things. And back in the 70s, without the ADA, because the ADA didn't come along till the early 1990s, back in the 70s, you might have, for instance, a student that used a wheelchair that was accepted to a wonderful university like UNCG. And when they got there, there might not be elevators in a building. Or, for instance, on our campus, the provost and the chancellor's office are located respectively on the second and third, level of a building. And what would happen is here you have a student who, just like every other student, is paying his or her tuition, should have full access to be able to see their provost or chancellor when they wanted to, and they physically couldn't. And back in the 60s, there were things called sit-ins. Well, in the disability movement, there were things called crawl-ins. And what that meant is if someone in a wheelchair had enough upper body strength that they would pull themselves out of their chair and begin to pull themselves up, crawl up the flight of stairs to be able to see their provost or their chancellor because there was no elevator or there was no access. Obviously, that had a huge impact on the social consciousness when people would see something like that on the 6 o'clock news. And so, thankfully, we then ended up with concepts like universal design and the ADA to make sure that every student, regardless of their ability or their disability situation, had an equal opportunity to participate in everything when they came to a campus like ours.
I didn't know the thing about the Fair Housing Act and the way that it's related to support animals. Could you, I know I'm now entertaining, getting sidetracked a little bit, but could you tell me and the audience
Certainly.
a little bit about the connection there?
Certainly. It's a new, relatively new dynamic on campuses such as ours with extensive student housing. And what the Fair Housing Act approves is that a student's room is considered their primary residence for a legal situation when they come to campus. And under the Fair Housing Act, an emotional support animal, which is an animal that is approved specifically related to a psychological mental disability to provide therapeutic support to an individual, can be approved. So one of the services that we provide through our office is we work with student housing to help make sure that students that are appropriately in need of that accommodation are given consideration and are approved for emotional support animals.
Great. And that would also extend, it's beyond housing, does it also extend into the classroom?
No,
or
it does not
Okay.
automatically.
Okay.
Because it is a housing law.
Okay.
Under the federal law. The possibility of an ESA going somewhere else on campus would be an additional process because then they would be under either the ADA or Section 504 as an academic accommodation as
Got
well
it.
as a housing accommodation.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Certainly.
So when we talk about universal design, we are talking about design with intentionality up front. It's not a design retrofit, it's an intentional design up front. So could you talk a little bit about the ways in which it's preferable to start from a universal design perspective rather than waiting for the need to arise for particular accommodations?
Indeed. I mean, we all know that that's pretty much common sense because being proactive is much better than being reactive, especially after an instructor may have designed certain activities or certain components of their class, and now they find that they are challenged with how to make them fully accessible to some students. It's just good policy. It's fiscally responsible as well, too. The example I always like to use when I'm talking about this, and this university will remain nameless. When I worked in the state of New York, one of the things I used to do was review campuses for accessibility for the state department, the state education department. And there was a wonderful university I reviewed in New York City that had just built a huge, beautiful new state-of-the-art physical recreation facility. They put in 2 beautiful Olympic-sized pools. And we were standing there as a group while I was giving them input, looking at these 2 beautiful pools, and I said, well, now, I know, because I did my homework before I came to your campus, that you have a pretty much national or world-renowned nursing program at this campus, don't you? Well, yes, we are extremely proud of that. And you have a physical therapy program, don't you? Well, yes, that's another program that we're extremely proud of. And I said, and part of the reason why I'm here, obviously, is because I know you have a population of students with disabilities. They said, well, yes. I looked at the 2 pools they had just put in, and I said, so where is the access to these pools? And you would have thought I would have asked, how do you get to Mars in 2 seconds or less? They hadn't thought of it in a proactive approach. And what happened then is because it could have been so beneficial, not only for the access for the students themselves to the pools, but think of what they could have done with therapeutic situations, with their physical therapy program or their nursing program and whatever. It turned out at that time, if they had taken it into consideration in the development and the design of their pools, it would have cost them 2/3 less than it cost them to go back and jackhammer up one end of the pool and make sure that it then had physical access. So it's the right thing to do, but it helps us all fiscally, it helps us benefit, and again, it certainly makes sure that you don't spend a lot of time designing something that isn't going to be accessible to everyone too.
Great, yeah. So if we're talking to an audience of nurses doing therapy, you've already given us one example, but could you give us maybe a few other examples of things that faculty, maybe in the broadest sense here, should be paying attention to if they're looking at a course redesign or looking at trying something new in their classroom, things that they should have in the back of their minds as they start to think about design and design in terms of universal design?
Certainly, and again, you don't have to write all of this down. It is on our website, and there are also a number of resources on our website that will refer you to other places. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And to be quite honest with you, if you haven't done this kind of planning before, you may have all the best intentions in the world, but you don't think of everything. For instance, if you are an instructor that is going to use a lot of videos or films in your class, probably on that checklist of I should take this into consideration, look at your films when you're ordering them or creating them as to how they can be accessible through already being pre-captioned or how they can be captioned. Look at the films you may use that if you end up with blind students in your class. There is an accessibility feature called Video Descript, and movie theaters now actually have units that blind individual can borrow when they go with their friends to enjoy a movie that describes the action that is occurring on the film. So if you have ever been to a Clint Eastwood movie showing my age, or I guess Marvel or DC would be better examples right now, and there's a whole lot of noise and thunder and buildings exploding and whatever, if you're blind, what concept are you getting from the noise alone? The Video Descript will explain what is occurring to someone on the screen so they can have a full appreciation as well. If you are designing your materials, take into consideration your printed materials, take into consideration, for instance, the contrast. You never want to use, for instance, a gray background with light pink print. Even though it may look beautiful, it's a no-no for folks with low vision issues. The size of your font is important, or can it be enlarged in some way to be fully accessible?
And that would apply for slides too, I assume, for
Indeed.
Lecture slides and that sort of thing.
Certainly,
yeah.
Overheads, anything of that matter, yes. If you're teaching a science class and there's a lab connected with it, certainly the OR's office can help, but there would be considerations like maybe one station needs to be at a certain height or a flexible height for individuals in wheelchairs that would need access to be able to participate in a lab. If there are microscopes in the room, are there microscopes, at least one station or whatever, that would have capability for low vision individuals, that type of thing. Again, it's a lot of common sense, but it's like you try to think of everything when you're going on a trip, and you don't always think of everything. But the common sense comes in, like if you're going to Antarctica, you're going to take warm clothing with you. So by taking this proactive and positive approach, you can help avoid having to scramble later on when all of a sudden you get a student coming up to you with a faculty accommodation letter from ORS, or telling you, if you're an online instructor, and we do provide faculty letters for online students too, but you have a student online introducing themselves and saying, oh, by the way, I have these disability concerns. And all of a sudden, you're scratching your head going, but I designed my course this way. How do I address that now?
Yeah. I like use the proactive but also positive, that there's something, and in some of the material from Orr's that you shared with me, the idea was that human difference is natural and human difference is inevitable, that this type of difference is not something to say we need to accommodate for X, Y, and Z, but rather to say let's make sure from up front we're affirming all of the different types of humanity that there are.
And from an instructor's point of view, I mean, we just used an example of science. Wouldn't you like to be the instructor that helped develop the next Stephen Hawkins? I mean, think about it. And there's a man that had severe disability considerations as his life progressed. And yet, his mind, he was a genius. And he's given us theories and ideas that we will benefit from for a long time. So we all gain by an investment in universal design and approaching this in a most positive way that we can. It's always interesting when instructors contact us and are seeking assistance or whatever, and we certainly appreciate them contacting us, because they're always amazed sometimes at the resources of what's out there to help accommodate students. You know, one of the big resources obviously is adaptive technology. And adaptive technology has made it possible for people in wheelchairs now to actually go upstairs. It's made it possible for them to go out on the beach with their friends. It's made it possible for them to be able to be placed erect so that they can work at certain workstations that previously probably had to be adjusted to a certain height. We have all kinds of adaptive technology in our office, like Smart Pens and Read and Write Gold and Dragon. And I'm not going to take my whole time explaining to this is a teaser. So for you folks that are listening, come on over to our office. We'll be glad to demonstrate them and show you how they can benefit students, you know, in an academic setting. Because the whole bottom line here, when we talk about universal design and we talk about the laws that we function under as a university, is to give every student an equal opportunity to participate, an equal chance to show their talents and their abilities, not for any of us to judge them, grade them, or limit them by a disability situation.
Yeah, so thinking in terms of the adaptive technology and thinking sort of the overlapping part of the Venn diagram between your work and the work that we do here at the UTLC and the Teaching Innovations Office, as we encourage faculty to include more active learning practices in their work, as we try to help them think about how to get students working with material, and sometimes that requires them to be actually active. Sometimes it doesn't require them to be actually active physically, but rather just working with applying concepts or working with material in different ways than the sort of passive reception of information in a traditional lecture hall. But as faculty start thinking or working with innovative ways to get students engaged with materials, what's some advice that you would give for, obviously seeing some of the tools that you have is one of the key steps there, but what are some other things that faculty can do in advance to think about how to combine active learning strategies with also being aware of universal design principles and the possible need for accommodations?
That's a great question, because what we certainly don't want to do is confine or limit some of the creativity that can come out of great ideas by faculty as to how they're going to energize and engage their students as well, too. But again, the proactive approach, our office is open year-round. We don't go anywhere in the summer. So if you're planning in advance for, a course you're going to teach in the fall, we can work with you. We can sit down together, or if you're not here, we can do it by, Skype, or we can do it by phone or whatever, to help you to take into consideration planning the reflection of providing your course in the most possible way. Because to be honest with you, when we talk about universal design, remember we started out our conversation today, it benefits the most number. We're talking about disability today, but universal design benefits us all. I mean, let's be honest. How many of us have been very thankful when there was a ramp or a door opener on a building when our hands are full of materials that we're taking with us to teach a class, or we're going to do a presentation and that cart would have to be pulled upstairs rather than up the ramp and whatever. The older I've gotten, the more I really like buildings that have elevators in them. We all benefit from some of the things in certain ways. I mean, captioning is a great resource. I mean, it's the perfect time to talk about it during March Madness.
I was going to say,
If
I was watching a game on mute last night and had the captions going. So.
Well, if you go to your local watering hole with your friends to enjoy it, you're not going to be able to hear what the announcers are saying up on those 16 screens. But if there's captioning up there, you get access to it. And it wasn't because you were deaf, it was because of the circumstances you were in.
Yeah, so the really driving home the flexibility of design across all of those possibilities is one of those core principles that benefits everyone, and not just particularly in thinking in terms of disability. So I appreciate not wanting to detail every tool that you have, but is there a particular tool, one either new tool or one surprisingly useful tool, or just a favorite that you have that you could tell us a little bit about?
Well, I got lots of favorites. So let me pick two, and I'll be brief.
Okay.
All right. First of all, the one that many students use, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 of them out every semester. It's called a Smart Pen. And the bad joke you'll hear me make when I'm at SOAR is, when I'm talking to the incoming students, and I hold it up, this really is called a Smart Pen, because just like you, it chose to come to UNCG. Smart Pen is a marvelous device, and it looks like a larger pen, but certainly not the size that's immediately going to out you. There's many more pens that are decorative that are even bigger than it. And it's both a pen and a recording device. And what it can do for you is, if you're in a class here at UNCG, let's pick on psychology, and you have an instructor that talks like they work on the weekends as an auctioneer. And they're going, abnormal psychosis, and this is what you have to know on the test next week, and let's move on to the next subject. And you look at your notes, and the only thing you got written down was abnormal. None of the information you have to have for that test to show the instructor you're learning the material in the class. With the Smart Pen, so long as you wrote one word down, even one letter, all you have to do is tap on that one word or that one letter, and it will play that particular part of the lecture back to you so that you can fill in your notes. You can tap on anything else you wrote down to make sure you got it correct. It records, and you can listen to the whole lecture, but it's very time effective to go to individual information and material. And the reason we like it an awful lot is it's not only a success tool, but it's an independent success tool. Because when we talk about note-taking, previously the model was somebody else gave you a copy of their notes. Hopefully they copied or got the correct information the instructor was looking for. But it's like you and your friend go to a movie, you both come out, you loved it, and he's saying, why did I just spend $10 on that? Personal interpretation sneaks in there. Secondly, you have to wait for that person to give you the copy of the notes. With a Smart Pen, you walk out of the class literally with the information at your fingertips, and it helps you in an academic setting, but it also helps you prepare for the rest of your life, too. When you go to your first job, you're not going to get your own personal secretary. Smart Pen could help you in staff meetings, group projects, just meeting with a boss or a supervisor, and you go back to your office and you say, what is it I have to have done by Thursday, or they change the name on my door? You have the information right there at your fingertips. The other thing I wanted to mention real quick is called Drag and Dictate. And some folks may be familiar with that. That is a software program where you spend a little bit of time and train the computer to recognize your voice, because we all have different inflections and different ways of talking. But once you've done that, all you have to do is talk, and the program will type what you're saying. It's a godsend for students with different types of disabilities who have difficulty with their mind racing faster than they can type or write or compose their thoughts. It's also one of those concepts that I talked about that not just people with disabilities benefit from. CEOs love them because they can pace around their office and compose their thoughts. So some of the things that are universal design and benefit folks with disabilities benefit us all in many ways too.
Yeah, I know several people who, in the process of finishing their dissertation, really relied on dictation software as part of that process. Great. So to help wrap up here, if people are I mean, obviously, people have the website, and we'll put that in the show notes for people who, obviously, it's also just as easy as putting ORS UNCG in their browser to find it as well. But
we have two specific sections on our website. One says for staff, and the other says for faculty. Both of them have wonderful resources in them.
Great. So in terms of next steps for someone who's interested in learning more about universal design, apart from those steps and learning more about some of the tools you have in your office, what would be some other steps that you would recommend for moving in that direction?
Well, of course, I'm going to market ourselves first. We are more than happy to either sit down with you individually, or we have a lot of presentations that we are more than happy to bring to any size group, department, program, whatever, to help them fully appreciate and their interactive situations as well, where we'll take your questions or your scenarios and be able to help you with addressing them as well too. On our website as well, you'll find some great resources like DOIT, D-O-I-T. If you put that in on any computer, it will come up with a great website out of the University of Washington that has all kinds of resources related to universal design application and appreciation. AHEAD is another one, the Association of Higher Education and Disability. Again, all of these, don't have to worry about finding them. They're all listed, and you can connect to them through our ORS website as well, too.
Great. Well, thanks so much for bringing some of your 44 years of wisdom to bear on this podcast. And thanks for joining us on the Teaching Tips podcast.
My pleasure. And again, come on over to the ORS office. We're in EUC 215. We'll be glad to sit down with you and show you what we've got.